512 Marines trapped in a canyon. Enemy fire from every ridge. 40 minutes until reinforcements, 40 minutes they didn't have. Inside command. Officers whispered the same phrase like a prayer. Hold position. Wait for protocol. But one woman knew the truth. Protocol couldn't save them. Only precision could. Sergeant Delaney Rhodes. They called her logistics. Dead weight. The woman who warned them 3 weeks ago and got ignored. Now. She stood at the armory door, rifle in hand, watching the map turn red. She had two choices: obey orders and watch them die, or break every rule and save them. She chose the rifle. This is the story of Sable 3. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, and if you believe honor and courage still matter, help keep their legacy alive. 512 Marines, 40 minutes of ammunition, 0 air support. The valley was already a tomb until one rifle changed the math. Her name was Sergeant Delaney Rhodes, but around base, they didn't call her that. They called her logistics, not Sergeant, not Rhodes, just the woman who counted bullets but never fired them. 3 weeks earlier, under the cold fluorescence of Fort Rockwell's operations room, she sat at the end of a long table. Maps covered the wall, digital overlays blinking with heat signatures. She'd spent months analyzing those grids' terrain, wind patterns, supply choke points. When her turn came, she stood and pointed at a red sector on the map. Raven Gorge, she said. If insurgents ever ambush here, we'll be trapped. No line of sight, no cover. Recommend overwatch from Ridge 7. The colonel barely glanced up. Noted. She knew what that meant. Noted was military for ignored. When she sat down, a lieutenant leaned over. Appreciate the enthusiasm, Rhodes, but intel's already covered it. That night, she opened her notebook, the one she kept for herself, not the unit. Page 47, Raven Gorge, probable ambush site. Recommend avoidance or overwatch. In the margin, someone had spilled coffee across her handwriting. She traced her finger through the stain. Jaw tight. I told them, she whispered. I fucking told them. Then she closed the book and pressed her thumb against the dog tag hanging at her neck. It had belonged to her father, Carlos Marquez. U.S. Marine Sniper, Fallujah, 2004, he used to say. Rules are for when bullets aren't flying. Mija. She'd learned his math early: 1 breath, 2 aim, 3 certainty. But that math didn't fit Fort Rockwell. Here, no one cared about precision. They cared about paperwork and staying invisible. A week before deployment, she'd submitted a transfer request. She'd written it late after hours, alone in the barracks laundry room. 3 paragraphs, explaining why she was done being invisible. Her finger hovered over the submit key. Then she heard laughter outside. Rhodes, you mean the logistics queen? She'd lose a firefight with a calculator. The words stung more than they should have. She deleted the request, opened her notebook again instead, started drawing wind vectors for Raven Gorge, just in case. When dawn came, she was still awake. Her bunkmate, a young medic named Aaron, glanced at her open notebook. Are you planning for a fight that isn't coming? She asked. Delaney didn't look up, just preparing for the one that will. Aaron hesitated, then nodded. You always do that. Do what? Write everything down. Delaney gave a faint smile. If the system forgets, the notebook won't. 2 days later, the mission briefing confirmed her worst fear. The battalion would move straight through Raven Gorge. Same route, same kill box she'd warned about. She kept silent, eyes fixed on the screen. When the colonel finished, he looked around. Questions. No one spoke. Not even her. Outside, the wind whipped sand across the airfield. She walked to the shooting range, alone, and unpacked a rifle no one had seen her use in months. A simple M2010, the same model her father carried. She adjusted the scope, loaded 1 round, and fired at a target 800 meters away. The bullet punched dead center, slicing through the same hole twice. The range sergeant blinked. Damn, Rhodes, you hiding something? She said nothing, just reloaded, aimed again, and hit the same mark. Then she packed up and left without another word. The sergeant stared after her, unsure whether to laugh or salute. That night, she sat on her bunk cleaning the rifle piece by piece. The dog tag rested beside the bolt, reflecting dim light. Her father's name had faded, the letters smooth from years of touch. She whispered to the silence, "If it happens, I'll be ready." Outside, the desert wind howled through the hangars, carrying the scent of dust and metal. Inside, her notebook lay open to one line underlined twice Raven Gorge high risk. No support expected. The next morning, transport trucks roared to life before sunrise. Engines growled across the base as soldiers loaded gear, shouting over each other. Rhodes climbed aboard the last Humvee. Silent as always, notebook tucked under her arm. The corporal beside her smirked. "You bringing that thing to war?" She didn't answer. Instead, she flipped to a blank page and wrote 3 words. 40 minutes. Alone. As the convoy rolled out, the rising sun painted the desert in amber light. She closed the notebook, pressing her father's dog tag between its pages like a seal. They called her dead weight, the narrator would say one day, but by sunset, the desert would remember her name. The ambush came at 14:32 hours. Not from above, not from the flank, straight through the heart of Raven Gorge. Explosions rippled across the canyon walls, echoing like thunder trapped in stone. Delaney's Humvee spun sideways as the first rocket slammed into the lead vehicle. Glass shattered. Smoke filled the air. Somewhere in the chaos, a voice screamed. Where boxed in command's orders came seconds later flat, robotic, wrong, hold position, reinforcements inbound in 40 minutes. 40 minutes in a kill box. Delaney knew the math. 40 minutes of ammo. Hundreds of hostiles above. 0 air support. She grabbed her radio, shouting through static, requesting immediate overwatch on Ridge 7. The reply crackled. Negative. Ridge 7 unmanned. Stay put. She looked toward the ridge, empty, sunlit, wide open. Then at the Marines pinned behind half-burned trucks, outnumbered 10-1. The decision took her 2 breaths. She slung her rifle, shoved a spare mag into her vest, and ran. Someone shouted after her. "Where the hell are you going out?" she said. "Where I should have been 3 weeks ago." The climb was brutal. Loose shale shifted under her boots, cutting into her palms as she crawled higher. Every few feet, she stopped to catch breath. Not because she was tired, but because each second lost meant another Marine dying. Halfway up, a machine gun opened below, cutting through the wounded line. She pressed against the rock, waited for the burst to pause, then climbed faster. When she reached the ridge, her arms were trembling. She dropped flat behind a slab of limestone, unpacked her rifle, and scanned the chaos below. Dust and fire blurred the canyon into a storm of noise. Through the scope, the world narrowed to angles and breath. The first target was easy, a gunner raking the convoy. She inhaled, exhaled, squeezed. The bullet struck center mass. The machine gun fell silent. Below, Marines lifted their heads in confusion. Someone yelled into comms, "Who's covering us?" No one answered. She shifted to the next target, 2 men setting an RPG launcher. Another breath, another squeeze. 2 bodies dropped before they could fire. Her headset hissed with chatter. Unknown marksman assisting confirm identity command's voice returned. Negative authorization on overwatch fire. Delaney ignored it. Wind from the west 5 knots, range 900 meters. She adjusted, fired again. The recoil driving pain through her shoulder. She didn't stop. Couldn't. Then the counter-sniper found her. The first round clipped the edge of her cover, showering her with stone fragments. The second round tore through her sleeve and into her shoulder. She gasped, blood hot against her uniform. The pain was sharp, but the silence that followed was worse. She pressed her hand to the wound, grit her teeth, and chambered another round. The bolt jammed, carbon buildup, sand, maybe blood, she couldn't tell. Below, a squad sprinted for the helicopter as an enemy gunner swung his barrel toward them. 5 seconds. She slammed the bolt once. Nothing. Vision blurred not from fear, from blood loss. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on." Then she heard it, her father's voice, calm, distant. "Breathe." "Mia." She exhaled slowly, cleared the chamber by feel, and locked the bolt. Aimed. Fired. The machine gunner folded before he could pull the trigger. Her body trembled, adrenaline fading. She leaned her head against the rock, counting each heartbeat like a metronome. Not dead yet. Through the haze, 2 new targets came into view. North Ridge enemy commander barking orders. South Slope and RPG team loading for another shot. 2 threats. 1 bullet left in the mag. She steadied her rifle. If she killed the commander, the squad might retreat. If she missed the RPG, the helicopter burns. 3 seconds to choose. She aimed for the RPG. The shot cracked. The launcher exploded mid-arc. The helicopter lifted clear, but down below, the enemy commander was still shouting, rallying the line. A second later, gunfire rained toward the wounded squad she couldn't protect. 1 Marine went down, then another. Her stomach twisted. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so damn sorry." She reloaded with her last magazine, hands shaking, blood soaked through her sleeve, dripping onto the stock. Her notebook stuffed in her vest pressed against her ribs like a heartbeat. The radio buzzed again, desperate voices cutting through the static. Echo 2 requesting overwatch, anyone up there. Delaney pressed the mic, voice quiet but firm. Still here. She fired again, and again, until the echoes blurred into one long roar. Her arm shook, her shoulder burned, her breath came ragged. But she didn't stop, not while any of them were still breathing. When the rifle clicked empty, she lay back against the stone, panting. Through her scope, she saw the wounded being carried toward the chopper. For the first time since the ambush began, she allowed herself a single breath of relief. Then she whispered into the wind, 511 saved. Not done yet. Below, the last bird rose into the smoke. Above, the ridge echoed with 1 heartbeat hers. The canyon burned beneath a cloud of dust and cordite. Smoke rolled up the walls like a rising tide, black against the sun. Delaney lay on her stomach at the ridge's edge, breathing through clenched teeth. Her shoulder throbbed, every pulse sharp as a knife. She forced herself upright, wiped blood from her cheek, and checked the rifle again. It wasn't clean, it wasn't steady, but it was still hers. Below, Marines scrambled for cover. Enemy mortars fell closer, tightening the noose around the trapped battalion. Someone yelled into the radio, "Command! We're losing comms. Who's firing for us inside the command tent miles away?" Confusion turned to disbelief. On the digital feed, pinpoints of precision fire flashed across the grid, one after another. Perfect spacing, identical intervals. "Sir?" a tech said, voice shaking. "That's sub-MOA accuracy." Another officer leaned in. "From who?" The colonel hesitated, staring at the call sign flickering on screen, Sable 3. The room went silent. Someone muttered, "That program's been inactive for 6 years." The colonel whispered, "It's not inactive anymore." Back on the ridge, Delaney adjusted her elevation. Her rifle's scope reflected sunlight, the glass cracked but usable. She found the next nest, 3 men loading mortars, and lined the reticle just above them. Wind 5 knots east, distance 960 meters. Her breath steadied despite the pain, despite the tremor in her fingers. She exhaled and fired. The explosion tore through the enemy line, scattering debris and bodies. Marines below shouted, "Clear move corridor west." The tide had turned, but no one knew whose hands had done it. A round slammed into the rock inches from her head. Stone shards cut her cheek open. She rolled behind cover, heart hammering. The counter-sniper was still alive. He was good fast, patient, exact, but he didn't know she'd already mapped his position 15 minutes ago. She peered through the scope, scanning shadows across the far ridge. There a shimmer, faint but real, the glint of tempered steel. She steadied her aim. Then her vision swam, and the desert melted away. For a heartbeat, she wasn't on the ridge anymore. She was 10 years old again, lying beside her father in the training pit behind their house. "Don't rush," he said softly. "You can't force the shot. You listen for it." "But how do I know when it's right?" she'd asked. "When the world holds its breath?" he said. She blinked back to now. The world had, indeed, stopped breathing. The crosshair settled. She squeezed the trigger. The glint vanished. Through the haze, a single plume of dust marked the end of the duel. She allowed herself one ragged smile. The radio crackled again, urgent. Raw. This is Echo. 2 wounded in open ground need cover fire. Now Delaney's hand trembled. But she reached for another magazine. She had 6 rounds left. 6 chances to keep the valley alive. She fired, shifted, fired again, each shot precise, surgical, final. Through her scope, she saw Marines dragging each other toward the last helicopter. One stumbled, another turned back, refusing to leave him. She covered them both, cutting down anyone who aimed their way. But not all could be saved. A burst from the south ridge cut through 2 young soldiers, barely men. She shot the attacker, but it was too late. Her stomach twisted as medics reached them, shaking their heads. 511, she murmured, then chambered another round. One more. A new threat emerged, an RPG team repositioning near the extraction zone. If they fired, the bird wouldn't clear the canyon. She forced herself upright, pressing her wounded arm against her chest. The barrel shimmered with heat. She felt the rifle vibrate against her cheek like a heartbeat not her own. Her father's words echoed, "Make it count!" The shot cut through the desert like thunder. Half a second later, the launcher erupted in a bloom of flame. The helicopter banked upward. "Safe! Bird 1 clear!" the pilot shouted. "Repeat clear!" Another voice came through, hushed with disbelief. "Whoever's on overwatch, thank you." Delaney smiled faintly. "Just doing inventory," she whispered. The last of the gunfire faded. Only rotor blades and wind remained. She ejected the empty mag, watching it tumble down the slope. Her sleeve tore open against the rock, revealing the ink beneath a small black insignia, a snake coiled around a rifle, the mark of a sniper school long decommissioned. The sun dipped lower, painting the ridge in molten light. She wiped sweat and blood from her forehead, one trembling hand steadying the rifle. The call came through, clear and final. All units accounted. Extraction complete. Delaney closed her eyes, breathing out slow and even. She'd broken orders, bled for every shot, and rewritten the math of war. 512 still breathing. 1 woman left on the ridge. The headset hissed quietly. A voice she didn't know saying, "Thank you." "Sable 3. She didn't reply. She just smiled through the pain and whispered, "Target area clear." The wind answered back, lifting the dust around her like a salute. And in that dying light, the ridge held its silence, a silence she had earned the hard way. 1 bullet at a time. The sun was gone when the last helicopter lifted from Raven Gorge. Only the echo of its rotors remained, rolling across the silent canyon. Delaney Rhodes stayed on the ridge a moment longer, her body swaying, her rifle still warm. The smoke had settled into soft layers of gray. Somewhere below, the dying fires painted faint halos on twisted metal. She counted them without realizing each one a memory she'd never forget. When she tried to stand, her knees buckled. She caught herself against the stone, gritting her teeth as pain seared up her arm. The dog tag at her neck clinked against her vest, light but heavy all at once. Halfway down the slope, her vision tunneled. Her boots slipped on loose gravel, and she fell hard, dust rising around her. For a second, she just lay there listening to her pulse, wondering if that's how it ended. The radio broke the silence. All units accounted. 0 KIA. Her eyes flicked open. 0. She smiled through the blood on her lips. She dragged herself upright, step by step, refusing the instinct to stop. Every move was agony, every breath shallow, but the word 0 pushed her on. If she could climb up bleeding, she could damn well climb down alive. Far across the ridge, a boy watched her, a shepherd, no older than 12, frozen beside a line of goats. He saw a figure descending through the haze, a woman made of dust and blood. His grandfather's stories came back to him then, the ones about spirits who guarded soldiers. who appeared when hope died. He whispered a prayer in Pashto and turned his herd away from the mountain. Years later, he would tell his children, I saw the angel of the gorge. She had no wings, only a rifle. By the time Delaney reached the base of the ridge, her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Medics rushed toward her, but she waved them off. I'm fine, she said, though her voice barely carried. The airfield glowed under floodlights. Marines stood in scattered lines, silent, watching her limp toward them. No one spoke, no one moved. They just made space. A corporal she recognized, the one who'd mocked her in the briefing, stood nearest the runway. His eyes followed the blood dripping from her sleeve, the rifle across her back. When she passed him, he dropped to one knee. I'm sorry. Sergeant, he said quietly. She stopped, looked down at him, face unreadable. Then she nodded once. You're alive. That's enough. He stayed kneeling long after she walked away, the dust where she'd stood still swirling in the floodlight beam. At the far end of the tarmac, Colonel Beck waited, arms crossed, jaw tight. You disobeyed direct orders, he said when she reached him. Yes, sir. He looked her over the blood, the torn sleeve, the steady eyes. You also saved 512 lives. Her answer was quiet. That's what the math said. Before he could reply, an older Marine stepped forward from the shadows. Gray beard, faded ribbons, eyes that had seen too many wars. He stopped in front of her and stared at the dog tag hanging from her neck. Your father, he said softly. Carlos Marquez. I served with him in Fallujah. Delaney froze. The world seemed to slow. He told me if he ever had a daughter, she'd be a better shot than both of us. The man's voice broke as he saluted. He was right. Sergeant Rhodes. He'd be proud. For the first time. Her hands trembled not from blood loss, but from memory. Behind them, the crowd straightened. One by one, Marines raised their hands in silent salute. No applause, no orders, just respect, quiet, earned, complete. When it was over, she walked past them without a word, the rifle on her shoulder, the dog tag tapping against it like punctuation. The night swallowed her silhouette as the floodlights dimmed. In the armory, she sat alone at a metal table, bandaging her shoulder. The rifle lay beside her, its barrel dented where a bullet had grazed it. She touched the mark gently. You saved me too, she whispered. From her pocket, she pulled out her father's tag and hung it on the rifle sling. You were with me the whole time. Dad. The steel glinted faintly under the flickering light. Then she opened her notebook. On the last page, she wrote 512 saved, 0 protocol followed. A knock at the door. Captain Cross entered, holding a folder under one arm. Jag's reviewing the engagement. He said, they'll either pin a medal on you or court-martial you. Delaney didn't look up. Did everyone make it home? Yes. She closed the notebook. Then it's worth it. Cross hesitated. They might strip your rank. Your sniper qualification. She smiled faintly. Let them. The math doesn't lie. When he left, the room fell quiet again. Outside, the desert wind moved softly against the hangars. She leaned her forehead against the rifle stock, eyes closed. For the first time all day, she let herself feel the weight of what she'd done, the pain, the relief, the truth of it all. She'd broken every rule, but every life still breathing made it worth the cost. On the back of her notebook, faint pencil lines caught the light. Her handwriting read, if you're reading this, 512-1. Math doesn't lie, and below it, older handwriting her father's simply said, duty first, rules second. She smiled at the 2 lines touching, then closed the book and stepped into the night. The desert wind carried her whisper, I followed your rules, Dad, not theirs. 3 weeks later, Sergeant Delaney Rhodes testified before a military tribunal. Her words changed sniper protocol forever. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now, Click on the video on the screen to hear another story that's just as powerful and captivating, with courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about duty and justice.